This week's episode is sponsored by Leica.
You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For 50 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Derek Fassbender.
Welcome, listeners. I'm Derek Fassbender, host of the B&H Photography Podcast.
And I'm Jill Waterman, the podcast's senior creative producer.
And I'm Michael Weinstein, the show's technical producer and audio engineer.
In a recent show about the world of high-end photo assistants, photographer Mike Foley introduced the idea of always being a student. We're going to expand on that theme in today's podcast and take our discussion to new heights with photographers Chris Orwig and Aaron Anderson. While the high-key palette and natural light of Chris's photos form a sharp contrast to the dramatic film noir aura of Aaron's work, their chat celebrates the notion that opposites attract. Adding to our core topic of creative reinvention and reshaping skills at every stage of your career, we'll also delve into keeping abreast of creative trends and remaining relevant as a creator in an increasingly competitive commercial marketplace. But before we dive in, here's some additional background about each of our guests. Chris Orwig is a true Renaissance man, celebrated photographer, best-selling author, talented creative director and designer, passionate coach, mentor, consultant, and speaker, and a Sony artisan of imagery. Based in Santa Barbara, California, Chris has photographed artists, athletes, musicians, and celebrities alike and worked with a wide range of clients, from esteemed publications to top brands. In addition to commercial photography, Chris captures the magic and warmth of everyday life through family portraiture and wedding work. Known for his down-to-earth style, inspirational teaching, and contagious passion, Chris strives to inspire others to become more creative and lead more meaningful lives. Aaron Anderson started out with a camera and a speedlight back in 2009 and a goal to create images that people wanted to stare at, even if they weren't sure why. After countless hours in the studio, on location, and behind a computer screen at San Francisco's Academy of Art University, he honed his skills as a retoucher at Sugar Digital, emerging with a distinct style. Aaron, a Fujifilm creator since 2020, specializes in portrait, sports and action, and composite imagery for an impressive roster of commercial and editorial clients. Over the past 4 years, he's roamed the country in an RV with his wife and kids while simultaneously creating bold, iconic, story-driven imagery that engages audience and wows clients. Based in California and Colorado at different times throughout the year, Aaron works with incredible production teams in each location. Aaron Anderson and Chris Orwig, welcome to the show.
All right.
Thanks.
That was quite an introduction.
Take a moment, let it sink in. You guys are sitting there like, who are those guys? Who are the guys you just described?
I was waiting for someone to respond about being interviewed by those cool profiles.
Well, that's why we have you here. Chris, I want to start with you. You're an OG of the teaching game, man. You've had a lot of experience with teaching and learning photography going back to the film days, and both in person at Brooks Institute and online through lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning. What effects have these teaching experiences had on your own style and the progression of your own photography?
Yeah, that's such a fun question. I love teaching. I'm super passionate about it. And I have learned so much through the process. There's a secret that all teachers know, which the teacher is the person that learns the most in the room. And I heard it explained to me, like, if you're going to give someone directions in your hometown, you're going to learn about your hometown in ways you hadn't previously known it, right? Because we all know how to get places, but if you have to teach someone else, you have to own the information in a totally new way. And photography is the same way with me. It's been a wonderful journey to kind of solidify what I didn't realize I didn't know, or maybe I knew intuitively. And then the second half of that has been learning from my students. Like, I cannot tell you how many times students do things and you're like, wow, how did you come up with that? And they're just like, I don't know. So they have the beginner's mind, and that keeps me very fresh, because sometimes it's the assumption or the experience that actually gets in the way with photography. I think photography is a lot about like yeah, having a great plan, but also leaving space for the magic.
Is there anything that comes to mind in your career, a specific moment that you learned something from a student, or was there like an aha moment, like, wow, like, yeah, I really can learn from the people I'm teaching?
Yeah, I think I had just gotten my first 70 to 200. I was a little bit worried about the lens because at the time it was the most expensive lens I had ever bought. And I was talking to one of my students and he kind of gave me this framework about it. He was kind of like, yeah, your lens better get scratched, beat up. Think of it like a hammer. Like, this is a tool. This isn't something to put in a glass case. Like, kind of go out there, get after it. It's not precious, but it's meant to be used. So that was just one that popped in my mind. But that really helped actually early in my journey kind of set my approach towards gear and to see it as something kind of functional. So that was pretty cool.
Awesome. I feel like we're on like a daytime television show because I'm about to bring Aaron in. And it's like, Chris, guess what? We have one of your students backstage. We're going to see if these two stories match up. But it's like the perfect segue in because, Aaron, I'm just going to let you tell it. How did you come across Chris?
I know that it came through Linda. The coolest thing is that in Colorado Springs, if you have a library card, they give you a subscription to Linda. And at the time, I was just diving into photography. I mean, this was at least 15 years ago. And I hopped on to Linda and I just started watching every photography course I could find and came across his stuff. And I think there was something about his delivery and just the personable experience. You could tell he actually cared about the people he was teaching. And still to this day, I mean, even these many years later, you can see that's a thread that goes through his career and his work, and what I think really makes him stand apart, not only as a teacher, but as a photographer.
Yeah, totally. I can vouch for this. It's not like there's two separate Chris Orwigs. Like, Chris, your passion, like, it bleeds through in person, online. Like, this is what you do.
Thank you for that. It's cool to hear that. And back in the day, this was early online education, of course, and it was kind of taking off, and we were all trying to figure out how to learn these things. And I remember someone told me, like, Chris, when you record these, like, set a photograph next to your computer screen so that you remember you're always talking to a person. And that was a great frame for me too. Like, this is a one-on-one conversation, even though thousands and thousands of people are going to watch it, right? Which also goes back to this idea of photography. It's like, you're creating for an audience of one in the photographs we create. In other words, we want them to be meaningful. Or my mentor used to say, the more meaningful it is to you, the greater the chance it'll be meaningful to others and to a wide range of others. And so get specific, get personal. I think that's still true today in photography. And Aaron, when I see one of your images, I like instantly know it's yours. And I feel like I also instantly know you. And I think there are too many photos out there that are just, I'm just going to say generic. They're kind of like, I've seen them before. They're saying too much. They're like trying to have too big of a target audience, And I would even say the YouTubers and all these people, you feel like, oh, like they're talking to me, And Derek, your work too. When I look at your work, it talks to me, it speaks to me. And so I really appreciate that part of this craft.
Chris, I'm interested, where were you at, both as a person and professionally, back during this era? Because I kind of want to set everything starting right there. Like, this is kind of where, this is where Aaron became aware of who you were. And then obviously you in due time became aware of Aaron. But where were you at? Because I know we talk a lot about the progression of ourselves as people outside of artists. But where were you as both a person and an artist back during, let's just call it the Linda era?
I think I was at that place a lot of photographers are in the beginning, which is they're so hungry, they're so passionate, they're so excited. And I was just photographing a lot of everything. I was trying out different genres of photography, different lenses, different gear. And I think the trouble is I was a little bit stuck because I was photographing a lot of everything, like too much. And I wasn't quite narrowed in enough. So I didn't have a voice yet as a photographer. It was fun, but it was also frustrating.
Totally. It's like you weren't there. You were present.
Yes.
but you weren't really like you hadn't developed a voice or a vision as an artist. Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly. So I was kind of like impersonating people, or like someone would have a cool car, I would like photograph the car. There would be a cool tree, I would photograph the tree. I think there's two sides to photography, at least for me. The first side is like that response to something that stirs your soul, affects your heart, it catches your attention. And then there's the work of the photographer. The work is really asking why. It's exploring composition, it's listening, it's observing, it's composing, all those things. So I was like in step one, I was just like responding. And that's a really important step. So I'm not belittling it, but that's definitely where I was.
Interesting. And this kind of parallels you, Aaron, because one of your first jobs out of school was working as a retoucher, where you're taking someone else's vision and polishing it, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hugely helpful window to look through as a photographer, seeing other people's work and retouching it, changing it, putting it together, doing composites, things like that. Because one, I think it humanizes people. With retouching, you get to see everything. So all the flaws, the overexposures, all the different things, it becomes your problem. And also, it gives you this reality that they're just taking pictures like you are. And it's something that can be achieved and learned if you just take the time to do it. These are not superheroes. They have a camera just like us. Like Chris mentioned, they have the same lenses or whatever it may be. And that was a hugely helpful time in my career, just seeing that and then learning how to, in essence, save some images or work with bigger clients on deadlines and see the images coming in from a shoot and what they were expecting. So I think it was an incredible time of growth for me because I realized how little I knew. But then it was also a really eye-opening experience because I did get to see behind the curtain, so to speak, and say like, oh man, this is something that can be achieved. It will take time and work, but it's a lot more about who you know and your connections and your ability to connect with other human beings than anything else, because we're all kind of out there with similar equipment doing similar things. So yeah, it was a big time for me to help find my voice and help me understand what made my wheels spin, so to speak, and then dive back into it, being able to see it from a different perspective and see my work from a different perspective.
Were you retouching work that you wanted to create? Was it something where you just took a job, or did you have a style in mind? I mean, Chris talked about he was there, but he hadn't really developed his final form or found his voice. Were you in a position where you were kind of on the right track, or did that come later?
I mean, I think it definitely comes later. Like Chris said, and I think this is important to name, is when you first start with photography, you are kind of just taking pictures of anything. And I think that word taking pictures is actually a really good phrase for what you're doing, because you're going out in the world and you're allowing it to just come into your camera how it comes into your camera. And as you progress and things change, you start to frame it. You start to build it, you start to create it, you start to make things. And I think we all start at that place, which is really important because it helps you to see the way that you end up. I don't know, like fully formed. I guess it helps you become fully formed because you actually see like, oh man, this doesn't feel like what I wanted it to feel like. And I talk about that a lot. At first, it's not going to feel maybe like you envisioned or like you thought, but it's really about getting to that point. And retouching for me was a way to start to understand at least how to craft what I wanted. And that was, again, the huge part of it for me was like, wow, this is possible. And now I'm beginning to understand how it all comes together and how it's all formed. And maybe there's a few people out there that are savants and they're like, yes, I know exactly what I want to do for the rest of my career. And this is the only style that I have. And I'm making 7 figures or something. But that is definitely not my path.
That's such an interesting idea. It's kind of just I'm going to try to get my Chris Orwig on right here. Orwig, let me know if this is in line. You have like a unmolded chunk of clay. And it's like you start and you have to just start kind of forming it. And you don't know where you're going.
Okay.
You pull a little bit off, you shape it, you knead it. it starts to get more pliable. As you go, you kind of work with it. And, or like, drawing a picture. It may not look like anything for the first 90% of it, but it's that final 10% where you're like, oh, wow, I'm glad I stuck with this. I'm starting to see the vision now, and it's kind of coming together. And now I have, all that I've worked 90% of the way without really knowing what the final outcome was going to be. But now I'm here, and now everything's coming together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that resonates. And maybe even, Aaron, what I heard you saying was you got to see other people's process, and you got this to see behind the curtain to this idea that photography is an iterative craft. It's not like one and done. It's a process of getting there through all these different steps and stages. And the trick, of course, is we see final images and we're like, wow, that's freaking amazing. But we forget that there was the process that led up to it. And trusting that process is, and again, what I'm hearing you say, Derek, like trusting it, like you just don't know. Like so many times, like last week I had a celebrity photo shoot and we were doing a bunch of stuff, but one of the things we're on the ocean's edge. It's like really, really epic, beautiful thing. And our celebrity is jumping. He's wearing this really nice suit and he's jumping on this trampoline, right? So we're getting these images of him flying. And then it was like, okay, now I want you to do this thing where you fall into the swimming pool. So we did this like fall into the swimming pool. And everyone kind of thought like that was it, right? Like we're going to do trampoline and then the guy's going to fall in the swimming pool. But then once you fell in the swimming pool, I was like, come over here, get over here right now. Everyone's like leaving. And I'm like to my guy with the light, I'm like, dude, just hold this right here. And showed him how. And then started shooting this stuff of him in the pool. And then someone got him a unicorn float and he's like hugging it and he's kissing it. And the best photos are from that last moment. And everyone else had started to walk away. Then finally they all came back and it was like, people kind of got it. But the point of it is like, as a photographer, I had no idea that was going to happen. But I know to trust the process, and I know to like come in with strong ideas and try to achieve them. If they fail, you try something else. But then even if they work, look for what else might be there. And I think as a young photographer, like back to when I was there, I didn't know that. I kind of naively thought like people just got lucky and they just had magic and, they would just hold up their camera and, they would get it. But then as I've gotten older, I realized, no, we all have our different process, but it's definitely a process. Aaron, does that resonate with you? And it doesn't have to, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic because I just posted on LinkedIn today about trusting your gut and the idea of this kind of inner creative screaming at you. And a lot of times I think whether it's shame or feeling weird about ideas is just not saying yes to them, not saying, okay, yeah, we need to try this. And when I've suppressed that voice, when you say, no, I'm not going to listen to this, I'm going to just stick to the status quo and do the shot list, that's when you get the mediocre set. And sure, people are fine with it. But it's when you follow the grab the unicorn theology and you do it regardless of what ridicule you might come under or what people might say or feel.
Yeah.
That's when I think a lot of the magic happens because you're learning to trust the part of you that is creating. And that's a really fun thing to see that come to life because the more you can trust that part of yourself, the more consistently you can create images that feel like you and that look like the voice that you want to have out in the world.
Mm. I mean, it sounds like in listening to both of you talking about this, it's really a matter of becoming in tune to you and who you are and what your voice and vision are. And at that point, the lighting is kind of just the means to the end. The lighting is the tools, the camera, the lens, all these pieces of gear are really just ingredients that play into ultimately having the vision. But if you don't have that vision, if you don't have that, the unicorn in your head of like, I'm going to take this scenario and grab it by the horn. Since we're talking about the unicorn here. Right? I mean, because both of you guys, we talked about how you started out and it's kind of like layering. You're layering on skills at the same time as you're finding out who you are as an artist and finding out what your vision is and what your stamp is and who am I going to be as an artist. Can you talk a little bit, each of you, about that process, kind of the human process running parallel to becoming a more talented, skilled technician as far as being a photographer and learning and knowing the technical aspect of things?
Yeah, the first thing that popped into my head when you were talking about that, Derek, is this. I'm going to forget who wrote it, but I finished a book called Start With Why. And that, honestly, I read that book way too late. But this idea of starting with a purpose and staying with that purpose and making sure that it is a thread throughout everything that you do. I mean, that's really where my career has led me. And I think a lot of it has to do with who I want to be as a husband and who I want to be as a father, and the ability to show my kids a different path, but also provide for my family. And photography being this kind of interesting way for me to hack my way through life in some ways. Man, I get to do this thing where I meet and experience amazing things and amazing people. And I still get to provide for my family, and I get to be here with my kids, and I get to spend time with my wife. And it's this idea of a life that we created. So it's not just being a photographer or creator. It's looking at life as saying, hey, this is the life that we want to create for ourselves and be a part of and share that with people. So I'm sure it sounds super spiritual or whatnot, but it's for us as we journey through, it's been so important that we start with why. Why are we doing this? Why am I creating? Why is this a part of what we're doing? Why is this the way we live with our family? And yeah, it'll go into, I think, a little more detail as we go through some of the other things we're going to talk about. But yeah, it's really starting with why and understanding what it is that we're trying to accomplish with our lives as a grand scheme, and then how a career like photography can help to build and support that idea. So in some ways, I guess, like I think of photography as a tool, not just my tools, but also photography, because it enables us to be a part of other people's lives and to create things with other human beings that can potentially help or tell stories or shed light or whatever it may be. So yeah, sorry, that's a wicked deep answer. I should have let Chris go first, but there you go.
It's like the tools build the tool of photography.
Let me just throw out there, just to have fun. What is your why?
I've tried to create like a elevator pitch why, and for me, it's allowing people to feel seen, feel heard, and feel loved. For my family as well as for clients, is helping people to do that, and that photography, luckily, thankfully, has been the way that I've been able to do that.
Love it.
Wow, he teed it up for you, Chris.
I know. I don't even need to answer now. We can just
next topic.
Listen and think about that. Yeah, the why, I think I'll just pick up and add to the conversation, but that's a beautiful answer. And just to play with that question, why, for me, I think my development, it wasn't so much external, but it was internal. It was like, what am I longing for? What are my needs? What are my wounds? And as I got into people photography, I really realized I was photographing people that had qualities that I was longing to cultivate in myself. So, for example, early on, I photographed a world champion surfer who really changed the sport, but hadn't competed in decades. But he had reinvented himself. And so I longed for this ability to not just like be good at one thing, but continually to be good, and kind of the art of growing old, the art of like peaking, so to speak, and then also landing, reinventing. So like I got a lot of wisdom. He also lost his teenage son. Like, how do you deal with deep grief? And so that's one of my favorite portraits, is of that particular guy. And then another person that same day, the singer-songwriter Jack Johnson, who was this musician who was bringing like so much love and goodness into the world through his music, yet he was so down to earth and humble. And so I was like, ooh, it's so interesting to like be around someone who's celebrated and excelling and really kind of hard charger. I mean, to like put music out in the world, you really have to go for it, but yet is humble, quiet, and kind. And so anyway, for me, it was like looking at qualities I long to cultivate and think about some of my needs. I felt really lonely in the world. I felt overwhelmed by the world. I felt misunderstood. I'm an empath, so I really absorb energy. Like a tree would get cut down and I would cry. And my friends are like, dude, what's your problem? But I felt so sad. This tree in front of our condo got cut down. But one of the things I needed was connection. And I go to a big city, it's overwhelming, but I photograph strangers. That makes me feel connected. And so that longing to connect with people in a one-on-one way, which is a lot of my photography, was fuel that pushed it along. And so the why for me happened to be very internal. And it was almost like the origin of my photography. It was healing. The reason I did photography, I was hit by a car skateboarding. Dad gave me a camera, helped me shift focus off of myself, helped me to heal. And so then as that healing continued, I was like, oh, okay, like what else do I need to heal? I got a big ego. Well, then just photograph someone who's like the best in the world at what they do. And suddenly you're like, oh, okay, there's another way to handle ego than what I thought. Or I'm worried that if I get really good, then I won't be anymore. For example, in photography, we've gone through so many phases, right? There's like the digital phase and everyone's like worried, or then we're in the AI phase, everyone's worried. It's like, well, no, like change is a beautiful part of life if you can embrace it. And I've learned that through people I photographed who are older than me, which have kind of become my mentors. I love the why that you bring that up.
I want to talk a little bit about you guys' approach, lighting specifically. It's kind of interesting how you guys intersected early on years ago, and you have very different styles. You guys both do commercial work, but Aaron, you have more of a dramatic, moodier lighting, and Chris, very high key palette, natural light. I wanted you to talk about how you developed your styles, how each of you came to be the artists that you are now, or have that look that you have been defined by most of your career, because we are talking about progression here. How did that come about? How did this entire process that we've been talking about work towards developing this style, particularly as it pertains to lighting and mood and feeling of your overall imagery?
Well, for me, it can't be overcomplicated. We're talking about how we find our voice. So for me, silence has been the most important thing as I've evolved as a photographer. And the reason is I want to be quiet enough that I can hear my own voice, my own intuition, and tune into that. And so I found that if I would bring in extra lights and extra people, I couldn't hear myself think. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to go camera and lens, simple as can be. And then I kind of realized that I think natural light's actually harder than studio light. I mean, would be an interesting debate. But I was like, I want to be able to photograph anyone, anywhere, any time of day, any part of the world. I want to get so intuitively in tune with light that I can do this. And so that kind of set me on this mission to develop that. Now, like at the celebrity shoot I did, I was going to say 95% of it was with studio light. So I can do both, but I think finding my voice and style wasn't just about the light, but it was about not wanting. Maybe I'll tell a funny story. So like I used to critique students' work at the photo school where I used to teach. And I would see someone's photo and I would just be like, man, your subject just looks so uncomfortable. And then often we would have them photograph their setup or their set. And then so he would show me that one and it would be like a beautiful young woman standing there and this just like creepy guy holding the light or the reflector right next to her. And you could tell his energy was entering the frame. And so for me, I really was tuned into like everyone we have on set, everyone around is affecting this moment. And a lot of times when I'm photographing someone, there's like vulnerability or there's sharing, there's depth, there's kind of a soul to soul connection. And I found like the fewer the people I can have, the better. The fewer flashing lights, the better. Now, I've evolved to like explore how to do that with lights, but that's kind of how I found my way.
Interesting. Aaron.
Yeah, I'm like the exact opposite of that. I abhor silence.
Wait, can I say one interesting thing? I was mentoring this guy and he had music on the set. And at one point I was trying to teach, and I was like, can we just turn off the music? And afterwards I said, I've never done a photo shoot in my life with a Bluetooth speaker and music pumping and thumping. And he just could not believe that. It also made me realize, like, that's interesting. A lot of photographers love music and sound and energy and culmination of all the people. And again, I think with all of this, I mean, I think we all agree, there's no like right or wrong path, but the whole point for our listener is to like tune into what fires you up inside and do that thing. And don't do the stuff that's going to like squelch your ability to hear your voice, right? So anyway, Aaron, what fires you up and what gets your voice going?
I mean, I am definitely one of those people with Bluetooth speakers on, but it's, for me, it's interesting because it is the exact opposite approach. I think it's a great example of the breadth of what photography is, in that when I saw natural light and admire it, and I actually get made fun of for how much I stare at sunsets and things like that. It's incredible to me. I could just sit and watch. A lot of times on sets, even, if clients didn't actually need pictures, I actually don't know if I'd take them. But I wanted to see if I could recreate that, as opposed to the idea of, yes, being able to photograph in natural light and going out and chasing light and all these different things, but in another way, and saying, could I make that look like this with a studio environment? Could I make it look like this all day? And one of the best compliments I've ever gotten was on a big set, and we were in Hollywood, and the art director said, we better keep shooting because we've only got this light for maybe another 20 minutes. And I looked at him and said, you've got this light for as long as you want, because it was all strobe. And that to me was like, for me, it's a pinnacle idea. It's kind of weird, but it's recreating a sunset, but having it all controlled so that we can continue to create the images that the client needs and never be at the disposal of the sun going down or whatever. I think I got to the point where that was frustrating to me, where it's like, yeah, we got cool pictures, but I would really love to keep going. So that's where mine started. And I think because I started retouching and also started in compositing, you really had to understand what the light was doing. Because if you take a subject and you're trying to put them into a background where the subject is poorly lit, no matter how good you are at retouching, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look real. There's something in the human mind that's just not fooled by that. And you'll see it sometimes, and it's like, well, it is what it is. But understanding light for me was one of the most exciting parts of photography. And it was, how do we make this so that we can continue to do it? And being influenced by cinema and cinematography because of their ability to harness and control lighting, I started doing things that I was seeing done in movies and trying to mimic that. I love Chris's approach because I think it's that human experience. He's definitely honed in on how to bring out emotion in somebody and use what's given him. And I think for me, it was just a matter of, I want to know how to create that for a studio, for a set, for whatever. And it's really just a matter of interest and what piqued my interest, as opposed to, I appreciate the beauty, but I want to be able to create it differently.
And it sounds like you have this pre-visualization of what you wanted. Is that something that comes from the retouching side where you're working on the final product? And does that help you see the final product before you even shoot? Or is that something that came from before? Where does the pre-visualization come in for you, where you're kind of seeing what you're going to come up with?
Yeah, it's definitely a retouching mixed with lighting. I mean, it's a lot of failing, right? I think back to one of my first composites where, this is going to sound crazy, I had this idea, I don't even know why, of a girl in a field holding a giant lollipop. And it was based on some kind of story or something that I'd read. And I remember the instructor at the school saying, something's wrong. What's wrong? And I was like, man, it's the lighting. The lighting's wrong. It doesn't match what's coming from the field. And that was really the beginning for me of like, if I don't understand what's happening in the lighting, it won't look right. It won't look real. So it kind of goes back to that. And now, after many, many rounds of failing at being able to create what I saw in my mind, is slowly but surely, you're like, oh, that looks closer. That looks better. And learning the next time, I'm going to do it a little bit differently, until you finally get to the point where it comes out and you're like, whoa, that's better than what I had pictured in my mind. And it's really a fun experience, but it takes years and years. And I think that goes all the way back to the beginning of our conversations. Like, you're coming into photography, don't feel like you're just going to start getting these images right out of the gate, because it doesn't work like that. But slowly and surely, you will start to see the things that you imagine come into your camera. And it's a really exciting experience and time.
It is. It's exciting to progress. And when it's natural, you're doing the right things, you're finding yourself, you're learning skills. And like you said, Aaron, you're failing. And every time you fail, you're learning from it. You're learning something that you don't like, or learning something that you want to do differently. Chris, what does pre-visualization look like to you in your image creation?
Can I kind of bookmark that question and go back to a comment about cinematic style and light?
Totally. Totally. We want to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, what I love about Aaron's work is, the way you use light, so powerful and wonderful. But one of the things I wanted to tease out a little bit was, like, often in Lightroom, you can apply like cinematic presets. They're so funny, right? Because basically, like, maybe your shadows go kind of green and your highlights go kind of yellow, and it's darker and moodier. And it's like, back to the thing of the girl in the field of the lollipop, like, that color, maybe it has some hints to cinema, but it's kind of an empty application of that in a way.
Right.
But why I would say it's cinematic style is the lighting does have a cinematic feel, but what is cinematic is something that has story, that feels real. It makes us curious. We kind of have to lean in, like, we know enough, but not like too much. I'm trying to think of which photos of yours, but like, I don't know, maybe I'm getting this wrong, but there'll be one like a cowboy standing in front of like the backdrop, and you're kind of like what's going on here? And then color is obviously an important part of the way you bring your images to life. So like, light's a big part of it, but I'd be interested to hear, because I see what I see in your colors, and I could be wrong, and I got to just kind of pulling from memory, but I see a lot of warmth. So there'll be a lot of gold in it. You also will kind of go green, blue sometimes in the backgrounds. So anyway, I'd just be interested to hear your take on what is cinematic style from a perspective of light and color, as opposed to just like clicking the preset in Lightroom.
Yeah. And thank you for that, Chris. I mean, just even pulling out the stories. One of the things that I started doing at the kind of beginning of when I started working with Olympic athletes particularly was sitting down with the athlete before the shoot and kind of having it be a requirement. If we're going to do a shoot, I really want to know who you are. I don't just want to show up with something, and I want it to be specific to you and to your story and to what you want the world to know. And so in some ways, again, it goes back to utilizing photography as a tool, because one of the things I was thinking about when Chris was talking earlier about these conversations in photographing people that he admires or looks up to is I'm always blown away by the access that photography gives us. That because we create with this tool, people are willing to open up to us, to say things and show things that maybe they've never shown before, to cry in front of your camera, or to talk about something that's really hard or that was a really, really tough experience. One of the threads that goes through a lot of my work is the story of that particular person. And I try to do that, especially with personal projects whenever I can, but have also been able to do it with some client work, which has been really, really cool. When I look at the color or the scene or whatever's going on there, my whole goal is always to complement the thing we're trying to say, right? Because if my why is to help people feel seen, heard, and loved, I want them to be seen in a way that they feel proud of. And I want them to be heard in a way that people want to listen. And so utilizing color and depth of field or whatever it is, some of it is taste, some of it's just things that I gravitate towards. But a lot of it is how can we utilize the tools that we have, be it color or lighting or location, and draw people into the story in a beautiful and cinematic way. And so that's kind of my, I guess, longer iteration of why a lot of the images look the way they look. And it's because they're driven by a deeper purpose, which for me is to help them tell their story in a way that they feel proud of and they feel is beautiful.
That was beautiful. And I think this is a great time to take a short break. So let's stand up, stretch, shake it out. If you're already standing, have a seat and relax. And when we come back, we will continue our discussion about self-reinvention with Aaron Anderson and Chris Orwig.
Designed from the ground up for stills only, Leica's M11P rangefinder camera offers a unique experience for photographers who want to witness their surroundings using an ultra-compact, full-frame camera system. Handmade in Germany, the M11P features an all-metal body, sapphire glass on the back display, 256 gigs of internal storage, as well as the choice of over 70 years of M lenses, including some of Leica's most exclusive and exotic lens designs. Thanks to its unique triple-resolution 60-megapixel BSI sensor that offers 15 stops of dynamic range, creatives have the ability to choose between 60, 36, and 18-megapixel outputs in both RAW and JPEG, which use the full width of the sensor without any quality loss. The M11P is also the only camera on the market that offers dedicated hardware that encrypts metadata in compliance with the Content Authenticity Initiative. Head on over to bnh.com for more information about the Leica M11P rangefinder camera.
And we are back now. Briefly before the break, Aaron was talking about failure and how failure has played into his career. Now, Chris, I'm interested in kicking this over to you, learning about failures. What's a failure that you've learned from, or is there one that really stands out as a defining moment in your career?
Defining failure moment.
That you've never been asked this one before.
I don't think I have been. I'm trying to think of, let me just try to find one that's interesting. I mean, there's obviously so many failures. Photography is riddled with them, right? I mean, it's you try ideas and they don't work, but kind of on the more significant side of things. I think one failure, and this will maybe sound weird, but let me just see if I can find it, but is like, back to what Aaron was talking about with like your why and stuff like that, is there's a time where I just lost all interest in portraiture completely. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what happened. But then I tuned into it and kind of figured out what was going on internally and in my life. I think the failures, like the look back, the mistakes I've made are the times when I've ignored the why. I mean, I've ignored the internal thing that's going on. And there's obviously something to be like, you just keep chugging along, right? But then there's sometimes where you just have to be like, okay, I have to stop. Like, what is going on here? And I think the mistake there was that I didn't realize that. Fortunately, I had a friend who helped kind of point it out. And what I was doing was I was kind of impersonating myself. I was like recreating the same images I was doing. My heart and soul wasn't totally into it. I was frustrated about certain things that were happening in life. Like my income had dropped drastically. And so like I wasn't honoring that. Does that make sense? I know that doesn't sound like a traditional failure. I mean, I've had failures like I've dropped a camera in the ocean and fried it. I have
A little more literal.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I've had things where, or like I've done a shoot and afterwards I realized I made a mistake and didn't get a certain photograph I really should have gotten. So there's those things too. But I think back to kind of the whole theme of this is the bigger, more significant ones for me are the times when I'm not tuning into the inner landscape of like what's going on inside of me. And if I can do that before a shoot, be like, okay, Chris, what's going on? What's going on in your heart? How are you feeling? What's happening? And it doesn't mean it's like good or bad. It's almost like the Zen approach where you're like, this just is what it is. And then that awareness helps me then come into a situation and be fully present, who I am in the moment, and create from that place versus creating from a place of detachment. There you go. That's what it is.
He's like, I tied it all together.
Well, and if I can like riff off that too, because I've had this question before too, and I feel similar to Chris when we're trying to come up with an answer. Because I think in our minds, we go to the time when I, like burned down a set or something, but
Right.
which I didn't do.
Okay.
Just for clarification.
But it's the aggregate. It's the aggregate failure, I think, that really sneaks up on you. And I heard somewhere about the idea of burnout, and this kind of the science behind burnout is a lot of small disappointments or failures that accumulate over a time and then create burnout in you. And I really resonate with what Chris is saying with that. It's these aggregate failures that left unchecked create something in you that you don't even see building. And then suddenly your work isn't what it used to be, or it doesn't feel the way it felt before. Thank you, Chris, for putting words to it, because I think it is really the idea of aggregate failure that has been the most toxic and hardest part of just photography in general for me.
Interesting. I want to shift this a little bit. I think when we talk about failure, it's like the thumbs are pointing back at you. It's like, what did I do? I affected something that didn't go right. I want to kind of flip this on its side and really why we're here. We're talking about always being a student. And this is something that has been really relevant for both of you, especially as of recently in your careers. And a lot of this is due to the changing landscape of photography and social media and everything that we're going through as a culture right now. So I want to talk about being a student of the game and reinventing yourself. Aaron, I want to start with you because we did have a conversation a couple weeks ago that was super intriguing to me just about the entire industry at large. And for what you do, commercial is a different landscape than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And this is something that you've had to adjust to. So can you talk about how do you adjust to keep up with an increasingly rapid change in an industry while still trying to hold on to everything that made you the artist that you are today?
Man, that's such a hard question. One of the things I wish I had a really clear answer for myself and other people. I think the biggest thing that I can say whenever it comes to this kind of upheaval in culture and the way that things work, right? Which I think we are on the cusp of that. I mean, I think some of it's AI, but I think some of it's other things. But there's still human-oriented experiences. And being able to continue to reach into community and to stay connected and yes, stay relevant, but I think it's more about connection than anything else. And so that's where I've been trying to figure out, honestly, how to pivot in a lot of different ways is where can we go to create genuine connection with clients and new sources of income? Because there is still work out there. I think it's really a matter of how we're finding it has changed quite a bit. The size of the jobs have changed a lot. It's funny, Chris was talking about how when he was going through substantial income flux and things like that, which we're honestly going through right now because the landscape of the way commercial photography works and is paid has just become very, very different. And so I'm honestly looking at the skills that I have already acquired, things like scuba diving and teaching and speaking, and then looking at photography and saying, how can I apply skills that I already have and skills that could maybe put me into a different category of ability? And then also, how can I learn new skills within my photography as we're coming against this content creation? It's like, okay, how can I be a more effective content creator while still holding on to the quality of the work that I want to put out in the world? And where can we start to put all these things together to create a better client experience, but also still make enough money to live? So I think it's an ongoing process. I don't know. I wish I could say I'd arrived, but I think I'm still on the platform, to be honest with you.
Chris, does that sound like in line with what you're going through, or is it maybe a little different on your side of things?
Yeah, and maybe Refresh the question for me in my mind just so I can drop into it. I was kind of just getting lost in listening there.
Yeah, definitely. No, this idea of always being a student, just to kind of put a little more personal spin, you do a lot of mentoring.
Right.
And I know we had a conversation recently about, you have your skill set up, obviously, but there's certain things that in doing your day-to-day work, we fall into our norms and we fall into what we know and what we do well. And in one of our conversations, you've hit a point where it's like, I kind of I want to resharpen my tools, and I want
Right.
to maybe go back and incorporate a little bit more studio stuff, or at least the
Right.
knowledge
Right.
of it.
Yes.
And I think that's such an important distinction and a difference between you and Aaron, where it's like you guys are reshaping your careers in different ways, but kind of for the same reason. It's this idea of staying relevant, staying at the top of your game. And Aaron, I think you kind of just said it on the tail end of your commentary there about, you are never there. It's not a destination. This is a journey.
Yeah. The idea of why photography is so beautiful is literally you never stop learning. I mean, and your photographs from age 20 to age 80 are going to be vastly different. And there's always so much room for growth. I think there's the side of it, which is, let's just say, responding to the industry or relevance or whatnot. There's also a side of it of just like passion. And like I recently got a water housing and I went out in the water with a friend doing some surf photography and portraiture and hit my nose and it was bleeding. And he got this great portrait of me with like blood dripping down my face. But it was a total rookie mistake. I was just like so excited to get the shot, But I love that like I was so out of my element and it's been so fun to learn something new. Same thing like you mentioned with studio lighting. I've just been diving headfirst into doing a lot with studio lighting recently. And I'm like just learning things, trying things I've never tried before and experimenting and growing. And so part of it is like relevance, yes. Part of it's also passion, just keeping your passion alive. And then also kind of exploring how we change. Like a lot of my photography work is now more closely connected to mental health and wellness. And Derek, you and I have talked about this, but I'm pursuing this degree in psychology. And so I'm kind of like exploring like the inner psyche and who are we and why are we here? And most recently, I've really been kind of pondering this idea of that Dr. Martha Beck said that the opposite of anxiety isn't calm, it's creativity. And what that means for me is when we're anxious, we're narrow, we're closed, and we don't move much. We're like kind of limited in what we're doing. And when we're creative, we're curious, we're open, and we're kind of taking a step and we're active. And I've been working with some people in particular who've gone through a lot of trauma, deep depression, suicidal even, and exploring how the art and craft of photography, in particular portraiture, can be a way to grow through that and provide healing, connection with others, creating something. So, yes, I think the core idea of never stop learning, that's, I think, one of the most beautiful things about the craft is there's just so much space for growth. And it can be vertical growth, it can be lateral, it can be like do a 180 and do the opposite of what you've done before. And that has made it, at least for me, really re-engaging. Maybe last little thought here too is like I kind of have this feeling like as AI becomes more important, certain areas of photography are going to be significantly affected, of course. And we're just in a new era where photography and money aren't going to be as closely attached as they were, say, 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, someone might get into photography with the dream of making money. 20 or 30 years ago, someone might just do photography just because it was a hobby, like my dad. He just liked doing it and it was called a hobby. I think we're going to return a little bit to some of that hobby-like passion, which is doing this because we love it, because it causes us to become still and silent and to observe and look and listen and savor and all of that good stuff. So I'm kind of excited about where it's going in some ways. I mean, also, would I like to still make a good income from it? Yes. I'm not excited about how like that shifted, but also I'm excited. I think there's some purity coming back to it because everything's been photographed, right? And so then the question becomes like, well, why photograph it again? And it's like, because I want to, because it means something to me. And so therefore I will. And that process becomes more internal versus like trying to get likes or get accolades or get money from it.
Mhm. What's the assessment like of this process then? Like, how often are you guys reevaluating? Am I on the right track? Do I need to change? Because at the same time, you don't want to just start changing what's made you successful. We all realize that it's a slow burn and nobody's becoming successful overnight. So how do you know when is time to change or to re-up on what you're doing or what you're learning?
I don't know if you do know. I mean, but I do think of, again, I photograph people seeking to gain qualities or values, things that I want to cultivate myself. So I'll just go Jack Johnson, singer-songwriter, or records a great album. And when I've talked with him about it, it's like when he records another album, he really has to say, am I just going to rewrite the old album? Because I know what they like. They get metrics, like they know which songs worked, which ones didn't. It's very transparent. And so the temptation is to just do what you already did and do it again. But all musicians know that is a death trap. Like you're doomed if you just do that. So you have to evolve. And so I think it's almost like you don't really know, but the one thing you do know is evolve and tune into what's going on in your heart. Like with him writing one of his albums, his dad died. And so there's a lot of that loss in that album. And to not have that loss in that album wouldn't make sense, right? And so it's not like you're evolving, like you're trying to, I don't know, climb some tall mountain, but you're more like tuning into what's in the world. Who am I? Why am I here? What matters to me in this moment? And then how do I do that? So again, I don't think I know, but I do know it's essential. And it's essential to do frequently to reflect on it.
Doesn't it kind of seem like, Chris, it feels as if it's not necessarily something that we know, but it needs to be done constantly. I think the moment we say, I've arrived, or I know, I can tell you exactly the 3 steps it takes to become a student of life or whatever, it's like we see what's around us and we know what we're trying to accomplish. And so it's a constant evaluation. I mean, my wife can certainly tell you we've had a million late night conversations about, am I heading in the right direction? Is this where we're supposed to go? Is this how we're supposed to do it? And I think what Chris is really highlighting, and is the beautiful part of it, is that because of our interaction with other human beings, that helps us to stay on the right path towards whatever it is we're becoming, right? It's the path of becoming. It's not the path of became. So when he has somebody say, hey, your work feels hollow, or my wife says you're working 100 hours, that's too much. That doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this? Those things start to prompt us to say, hey, something's off or something's askew or amiss, and then starting to move through those. And that's how I feel towards it anyways.
Chris, I'm really curious about when you mentioned that at one point you felt like you just weren't engaged in making portraits anymore. And what was it that brought you back to that? Was there any kind of shift in your process to reconnect? Or was it that person that you spoke with who pointed that out to you that reconnected you? Can you dig into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So what I realized, and this will go a little bit into the psychology of things maybe, but was that for a lot of my life, I had felt like if you were to know the true inner version of who I was, that you wouldn't like that person. And so in a sense, there was a lot of self-rejection. And when you have deep self-rejection, anyone who's been through that shame and rejection of self, you look for ways to be validated, to be encouraged, to be filled, to kind of counterbalance that feeling. And I think one of the ways I did that, and I think it was healthy even, was through portraiture. I would try to see people deeply and wholly and fully, non judgmentally, in hopes that they would see me fully, completely, non judgmentally, that as I accepted them, they would accept me. And it was a beautiful healing process. But then what happened was at one point, I kind of finally came to the point where I like totally and completely love myself. So the self rejection was gone. And I was like, I don't need to do portraiture anymore. I'm like complete. I am enough. And so I was like, huh, how weird. And maybe it was sort of like, just use kind of an example. Let's say someone's grieving and they go for a walk through a forest to help process their grief. But then maybe 6 months later, they go for a walk in the forest and are like, I don't feel the grief anymore. And then, so they kind of have to ask themselves, well, should I keep walking in the forest? Should I run in the forest? Should I go walk on the beach? Should I do something different? So I really asked that question, like, should I do something different? Is that era of my life of being a portrait photographer over and kind of complete in a way? And I realized that no, it's not over. It's just I needed to do it from a different posture rather than one of emptiness. It was one of enoughness and completeness. And then it actually started to flourish in this whole new way. So for me, it's like, was that inward journey. I love the poet Young Pueblo, someone who I've photographed, but he has a book called The Inward Journey. And this idea of going inward to tune into that can become a source, fuel. And that's what happened for me. And so that was very transformative, as you can imagine. And I'm very grateful for photography and for the camera for allowing me to grow in that way.
Mm. And were there visual changes in the portraits once you made that shift and worked through that process?
Yes, I think so. I think, at least for me, if I was in a room, I'd ask people, hold hands if you've ever felt shame or felt like a loser or something. And usually there's enough people that say yes. And so then I would say, when you feel like that, you can be very threatened by feedback, or sometimes the response is to like control and do things the same way. So I think after that, I stopped being threatened by it. I got some great feedback. Like one of my friends said, Chris, we were talking about the visual side, and she said, it's kind of obvious. You're really good at the up close stuff, but you need to think like a cinematographer. You need to step backwards, get a medium shot, step even further backwards, show the scene. And I think because I was at a better place, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Versus like, oh my gosh, I'm not a good person, or I'm not a good photographer. And then more of that came in and more. And then now I'm doing all this stuff with lighting. And so it was almost like there was an openness to experiment, to try, to explore, to embrace, to encounter different people. So visually, I don't exactly know what that's looking like. I have a body of work I haven't quite shared yet that has been in even the last, I'm going to say 12 months. So it'll be fun to kind of get that out there, but also even to be comfortable enough to not share. I used to like want to share because it would like fill the hole I felt inside. But now I'm like, I don't need to share this just yet. And so it's been a great shift, and I'm very grateful for it. So yeah, it's changing.
Just this one thing that your explanation brought up for me when you were talking earlier about the portfolio review you were doing with a student, and you noticed that the model they were photographing looked uncomfortable, and then you
Yes.
asked for the wider picture, and it was because the model was reacting to somebody else on the set.
Yes.
And what I thought of when trying to visualize that vignette was the very classic type of photography advice. When you're there photographing a scene, what you should really do is turn the other way and look at what's happening on the other side. And I mean, sometimes you're looking at the right picture, and that's the picture you should take. But sometimes the picture is as good or even better on the other side. And it seems like there's some kind of connection there.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think, Derek, you coined this term for me of like situational awareness, where you're like aware of your surroundings, the environment, the light. I mean, Photo 101, they say, look at the sunset, turn your back to it, see what the sunset's lighting. In portraiture in particular, like I'm really thinking of what is affecting this moment and just being mindful of that and that mindfulness or maybe sensitivity. Let me just try to think of another example. Let's say with the celebrity I photographed last week, there's 12 people in our team and there's 12 of us watching one person. And he was trying something very challenging and he was having a hard time. And so I was like, okay, hey, you guys, like, why don't everyone just like take 5 or something? And then I stayed back with him and you could just see he was like, oh, okay, great. Now I can figure this out without all these people watching me, without their phones out, without the hair and makeup. And so in that case, it was just tuning into the pressure he was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And even someone at an elite level feels pressure. Aaron, probably your athletes too, like they feel a certain pressure to look a certain way or to make sure if they're lifting a weight, the posture is right or whatever it is. And just to kind of tune into that. Like sometimes there'll be someone's partner and I'll be like, hey, come over here, stand right next to me. And I'll say, okay, tell me something you love about your man over there. And then she'll say something and he'll kind of melt and I'll get a more sincere response. Like there's a lot that fills the frame. And if we can tune into that, it can really help.
I love that. And I want to kind of shift this to where do you guys see room for improvement in your own work or your own professional careers? Or is there an area that you guys can see now? Aaron, I'll kick it to you where you're like, hey, this is kind of my next iteration or my next direction that I need to take.
It's kind of weird because, not weird, but cool, that I actually am kind of going in the reverse. So learning to do more with less and saying, hey, I don't need 6 lights. We could do it with 1, or we could do it with natural light, or we could bounce, or, different things like that. So one of the things that I come up against a lot, and this sounds different than I want it to, but I get a lot of people that say before they've ever even talked to me that they can't afford me. And that's a very, very big hurdle to jump when you're working with commercial clients. And so to never get a call because something looks too polished is actually something that I've had to think about really recently. So showing up into a space and saying, how can we make this with less? How can we do it with a 2-man team instead of a 10-man team? Has been a really interesting learning curve for me. And I think for me as well, it sounds like as Chris is leaning into education and learning and growth and helping other people to achieve what they'd like to achieve as well, because that is something that doesn't seem to be going away. And in fact, I really agree with Chris in this idea that we're kind of coming back into a place where people are doing it because they enjoy it. And we have a valuable skill in allowing them to accomplish more beautiful imagery. So I think that's kind of where I'm at, is looking at how I can diversify my abilities and the things that I can do, and then also making it simpler so it feels more approachable for clients and for people looking from the outside in that may want to hire me, but immediately think they can't. So trying to jump that hurdle has been actually a really hard one for me. And those few things are what I've been focusing on in the last few months.
So going from gold coins to gold foil wrapped chocolate coins, essentially. And Chris, to throw it over to you, are we going from chocolate to coins, or what are we doing here?
This is so fun to talk with you guys. I think for me, where I'm going, as I kind of mentioned, this whole idea of like wellness and mental health and just exploring the connection between how we live and who we are and how that affects the photographs we make. I've always felt like having a camera in hand enriches life, right? Like Aaron, you were saying, it gives you access to these people. And it's remarkable. It's mind-blowing, the experiences you get to have, the places you go, the friends you make. And so really just exploring how to do more of that and see it as the art and craft of obviously the image making, but also, Aaron, back to something you said, like designing a life that's well lived and that you love and that inspires others and makes the world a better place. I know it sounds a little bit like naive maybe, but I think photography can do that. And so that's where I'm leaning.
It's like the conversation we have all the time, Chris, about the intersection of our art and who we are as people. Chris, the photographer, Chris, the human, Chris, the father, the husband, all of this stuff. And it's kind of all baked in to one. I mean, this was a great discussion with you guys. I want to thank you both for really just shines a light outside of photography on who we are as people and how that factors into us as professionals and vice versa. It's like we take some stuff from our professional life and we apply it to who we are as people. And then we take some of our process as people and our progression and what we learn, and we apply that to our professional life. So I want to thank you both. Chris, we'll start with you. Any upcoming projects? Where can we find more of your work?
Yeah, just my name. And right now it's kind of interesting. I'm in a phase of not sharing a lot, as I mentioned, because I'm like in creation mode, not share mode.
Love it.
But I am sharing just kind of life as it goes on Instagram and things.
Awesome. And Aaron, for you?
Yeah, same. I mean, my websites, I try to keep it up to date, andersonvisuals.com. And I try to be on Instagram doing the Tool Bag Tuesdays,
Keeping the mustache on point.
Keeping the mustache on point. It's the only facial hair I can grow moderately well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, just really focused on Instagram, and my personal page is the best place to connect. And I mean, feel free to reach out too. I try to encourage people. If you have questions or thoughts, or as long as they're not aggressive or weird, I'm down.
Well, a huge thank you to both of the fellows today, and to all of our listeners out there. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you are a fan of the show but are not yet a subscriber, please head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, B&H's YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts from, and click subscribe. You can also find us on the Explorer blog, where we post photos from our guests along with our show notes. And please join us on Facebook at the B&H Photography Podcast group, where you can share your favorite photos and comments on the show. I'm your host, Derek Fosbender. Jill Waterman is our creative producer. Episodes are recorded, mixed, and edited by technical producer Mike Weinstein, and our executive producer is Richard Stevens. On behalf of us all, thanks so much for tuning in today.
Thanks to Leica for sponsoring this week's episode.